Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. We just hit 80 subs. Thank you guys for all the support from the bottom of my heart, and I hope I can continue to make good content that you guys will enjoy in the future. Now on Saturday, there's a very underrated SEC game with Missouri traveling to the Swamp at Florida. Who do I think is going to win this game? Let's break it down. Missouri's 2-3 to start the season with Eli Drinkwitz at head coach. And at times they've played bad and at times they've played good. And the first game of the season, they played Louisiana Tech and they won 52-24. That's a good win. It's always good to get a win over a group of five. Louisiana Tech's not as good since Skip Holtz is gone. Then they lost at Kansas State 40-12 in a game that they weren't even competitive in, unfortunately for them. And a lot of people were wondering what's going on with Missouri. Is Eli Drinkwitz the right guy for the job? This game should have been a lot closer. Then they bounced back and beat FCS Abilene Christian 34-17. That was a good win. But then they lost 17-14 at Auburn in overtime in a heartbreaker with their running back fumbling the ball at the goal line. And if they score that touchdown, they win. And unfortunately, they just could not get it done, and Missouri lost. And then they lost another heartbreaker to Georgia 26-22. You had the number one team in the country at the time on the ropes. And unfortunately, Missouri just could not pull it out. In that game, quarterback Brady Cook had 192 yards and a touchdown. He's playing good to start this season, and he might not be what Connor Bazelak was last year from Missouri, who's transferred to Indiana. But Brady Cook is a young quarterback, and he does have a lot of room to improve, and I think he will. Running back Cody Schrader, 89 yards, and running back Nathaniel Pete at 37 yards against Georgia. Dual threat running back attack. It's doing good for Missouri. And wide receiver Dominic Lovett had 84 yards against Georgia. On the defensive side of the ball, defensive back Jalen Carlisle had 11 tackles. Defensive back Joseph Charleston had 8 tackles. Linebacker Tyron Hopper had 6 tackles. And defensive back Martez Manuel had 6 tackles against Georgia. So Missouri is playing good on defense, except in the Kansas State game. Beside that game, they're playing good on defense, and their offense has been pretty good to start the season, except for the Kansas State game. Really, that Kansas State game was the only game they didn't play good in at all. Then on the Florida side, Billy Napier is in his first season as the Florida head coach, and they're 3-2. And start the season. And kind of like Missouri, Florida's been inconsistent. At times they've played good, and at times they've played bad. They started the season against Utah with a fantastic win over Utah, 29-26. That was a great game, and they played fantastic. But then they came back around and they lost to Kentucky, 26-16. And a lot of people, including myself, thought that Florida was going to beat Kentucky. But unfortunately, they just could not win 2 in a row against great teams, and they lost to Kentucky. Then they bounced back and beat South Florida 31-28. But South Florida is not a good team. And Florida struggled in that game, and that kind of was a little bit alarming. And then they lost at Tennessee 38-33, something that has not happened in a long time because Florida's been beating Tennessee tons of times in a row. But unfortunately, they could not get it done at Tennessee, and they lost 38-33. But then they bounced back and beat Eastern Washington 52-17. In that game against Eastern Washington, quarterback Anthony Richardson had 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He had 45 rushing yards. And Anthony Richardson is a guy that when he is on, he is a top NFL caliber draft pick quarterback. But when he's not on, he can be very mistake prone. So if Anthony Richardson plays well, they can beat almost anybody in the country. Running back Lorenzo Lingard at 45 yards and a touchdown. And running back Trevor Etienne, Travis Etienne's brother, at 22 yards against Eastern Washington. Wide receiver Ricky Parasol at 22 yards and 76 rushing yards. Wide receiver Caleb Douglas at 62 yards and a touchdown. Ricky Parasol had a touchdown as well. And wide receiver Xavier Henderson at 40 yards and a touchdown. So all the receivers had a touchdown. And Ricky Parasol had one on the ground. So that shows you that Florida is they diversify their offense. They're running the ball. They're throwing the ball. They've got Anthony Richardson that can run and throw, and that's really good news for Florida because it keeps the defenses of the other team guessing. Safety Rashad Torrance II at 5 tackles, linebacker Amari Burney at 3 tackles, and linebacker Lloyd Summerall III had 2 tackles. So Florida's defense is playing well to start this season, except against Tennessee and Kentucky, and even Utah as well. But those teams are all really good, and it's hard to stop teams that have a high caliber offense. So who do I think is going to win this game? Unfortunately for Missouri had 2 games that were heartbreak losses against Auburn and Georgia. And unfortunately, those add up, and usually you lose confidence when you have games like that where you probably felt you should have won and you didn't get it done against teams better than you. And it's very hard to have that psyche to go to the Swamp and win after that's happened. And Florida, even though they've been really inconsistent, they have a lot more talent than Missouri. I think Missouri can win this game, but I think Florida's going to win 31-21 over Missouri. I think Florida's got a lot more talent. They did have a good, easy game against Eastern Washington, and Missouri just had a tough, heartbreaking loss to the former #1 team in the country in Georgia. I think Missouri's going to fall short. I think Florida's going to get it done, and they're going to win 31-21 over Missouri. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Florida or Missouri is going to win and why, and I will see you next time.